Okay, so welcome everybody to yet another IANDS Sydney gathering, one of our online versions, which might continue indefinitely because they're just such a marvelous space. So it's our September 2020 gathering, and I have the wonderful pleasure of introducing you to Mindfulness Master, John Shearer, who is joining us from Northeastern Country, Australia. And it's such a joy. John is such a joy. We've known each other for some time now. He has an incredible story. John's just released a book as well, which I don't have it right here in my head. I had a copy not so long ago, but it's such a practical book, Mindfulness Insights. It's like 52 chapters a week for a chapter for each week of the year. And John is just so approachable with his story and his wisdom that he shares. And I highly recommend you get yourself a copy. It's just a beautiful type of book to move through and be accompanied with. So I'm sure John will share a bit about that in his talk today. And we're going to hear quite a bit from John, actually. He has one of those not so typical stories, though when is a near-death experience ever really a typical story? John's is one that I guess we're going to explore more of the integration process too from John's. You know, there's the experience itself, but then there's what happened after the NDE and how John really had to move through some major challenges to then come out to another place. And I love highlighting these kinds of stories because we can so often get caught up on the experience itself and all the phenomena around it, but we're all human beings that then have to integrate and be in the world fully afterwards. And so what does that look like? And what does that mean? So I won't give away anymore. I'll just hand it over to you, John, and welcome to Sydney IANDS. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks, Nicole. That was a beautiful introduction. Yeah. Well, I'll jump straight into the story and I'll start at age 30 and on my dad's 65th birthday, 9th of June 1982. And I was driving an old 1418 Mercedes-Benz down the Hume Highway to pick up a load of superphosphate, actually, in the fog near Kilmore. And out of the fog came the back of another truck. And all I had time to do was reef on the steering wheel. And that was it. That's the last thing I remember. And then it all unfolded later when I came back. And I died that day and was obviously revived at the scene. I don't know much details, but I came back sometime later in Kilmore Hospital. Terrible name for a town, isn't it? Kilmore. It nearly killed me. But I still don't have words for coming back. It was black. It was blackness. I know I often hear about the light and different things like that. And someone made a comment to me just last week, actually. And they said, because I didn't see the light means I didn't really die. Well, hello. Who's the judge of that? I don't know. I really don't know. I don't know much about it at all. But I do know what it felt like coming back. I don't know anything about getting there, but coming back, I still don't have the words for. And that's like, what is that now? A long time ago, 82. Is that right? 38 years ago? Yeah, it is. Well, I'm 68. Yeah. Wow. But words that I can use to describe that is peaceful, definitely come straight to mind. It was very, very peaceful and also very far away. It was almost like I was in another galaxy and I was traveling through time somehow or through space. And it was just peaceful. It was nothingness. It was complete peace. Yeah. I don't think there is any words to describe it, actually. But I came back very, very, very slowly and then also slowly started to regain consciousness. And I was in a hospital, and that was the first thing that I was aware of, and probably was the sounds, very distant sounds that they were. And the next thing I was aware of was pain, and I was pretty smashed up. My dog was killed, and sometime later I saw photos of the wreck, and if you saw those photos, you wouldn't even give me a chance of being alive. Not a chance. But somehow, what happened, the corner, or the left-hand chassis rail of my truck caught the corner of the other truck and twisted out, and the bonnet of the truck, and it's a bullnose bonnet too, actually rolled up and came through the windscreen and finished where I was sitting. So somehow I got out, escaped, thrown out, I don't know. But yeah, it still amazes me. And straight away, actually, especially when I saw photos of the wreck, I couldn't believe I was alive. And what came to me was, there must be a reason why I'm alive. And that almost drove me crazy, because I wanted to find out what that reason was. So I started a quest in 1982, and I was just saying to Nicole earlier, you know, I've got year 9 education, and that helps me to keep my language simple. And that's probably the most feedback I get from my second book, actually. And the first one especially was, people just love how I use simple language, keep things simple. Actually, I'm a huge fan of simplicity. I think it was Leonardo da Vinci who said, simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. Isn't that a good quote? Yeah, and it is. And I really like to simplify things as much as possible. And I'll share a little bit about that later, about my teachings, actually. Very, very simple. Yeah. So getting back to my story, I came back and I started that quest. I wanted answers. So I started to study, especially religions and spirituality and culture, different cultures around the world. And really all I got was addictions and mental disorder, because later that year in 1982, I had what was diagnosed as psychosis, my first psychosis, and it went from there. And even though I was pretty smashed up and I had to have operations on my back and different things, I had brain injury as well. That was nothing compared to the 15 years I was stuck in the mental health system. And I call it stuck because I was stuck. And by 1997, mental health professionals told me that what I had was incurable, that I'd have to take meds for the rest of my life, and that I'd probably never work again. And I believed them. They're the mental health professionals. What do I know? And that kept me stuck. But, you know, I value my 15 dark years, I call them, now, because I learned heaps of life lessons, and it helped me to become who I am today. Those 15 dark years where I was up and down, manic and depressed, suicidal. I've been on a smorgasbord of medications. I even had electric shock treatment, a series of treatments at one stage, after I was very suicidal in 1987. And I don't have any answers. I don't think anyone has what's on the other side. But I know one thing for sure. It's powerful, very powerful, once you connect with it. And I'll talk a little bit about that. But what I do want to talk about today is 2 epiphanies that I've had. One in 1987, which I call a dark epiphany, and one in 1998, soon after I got my miracle and spiritual awakening. But that's part of the next part of my story. But 1987, I woke up, I was living in Wagga Wagga, and I woke up at 4 o'clock in the morning, one morning in May, very cold in Wagga, as you can imagine. And I woke up scared, real fear. So I wandered out the backyard first, which I often did. I wander out of the backyard and pee on a lemon tree and look off into the stars. And this fear was with me. So then I walked out the front, and I was only in shorts and singlet too, and barefoot. I walked out the front, and this presence was still there. It felt like it was behind me. So I started walking. And I walked and walked and walked. And I never felt the ground under my feet, even though I was barefoot. I didn't feel the cold. I just walked about 5 kilometres, and I ended up on the banks of the Murrumbidgee River in Wagga. And I'll never forget this experience. But I got there, and for a moment it seemed peaceful. And I was looking out over the river, and it was a bit of a favourite place for me, almost a spiritual place. I don't know whether that has anything to do with the fact that my grandmother was Aboriginal, and you know, and I do feel that connection, especially with water and the land. But anyhow, I was at this place, and then the epiphany, and I'm sure you all realise what an epiphany is. It's something that comes to our mind. It's not quite like a voice, but nearly. But it's true. You know, it's truth. It drops into our mind, and it's real. And the epiphany was, kill yourself or your youngest will die. It was powerful. And right there and then, I planned my end. I picked out a branch of a gum tree on the banks of that river, the Murrumbidgee River, a branch that looked like it was easy to throw a rope over. Anyhow, the only thing that stopped me really was that tiny voice in the back of my brain somewhere, the same voice that said, "There's a reason." Well, I got that same message again, and I got it often. There's a reason. You'll get through this. And that stopped me. And I ended up in we're not allowed to call them psych wards anymore, but I ended up in a mental health unit that day and spent time in there, very depressed. And that's when they gave me a series of electric shock treatments, which all that does is it takes your memory away. It kills memory cells in your brain somehow. They're still doing it too. It's barbaric. But anyhow, that's another story. Yeah, so that was my dark epiphany. Then in 1997, I got what I call my miracle when an old friend of mine, who I hadn't seen for nearly 20 years, and I haven't seen him since either, knocked on my door and told me his story. And I remember the date well, because just like 9th of June 1982 was a date that changed my life, and 10/10/1997 is another date that changed my life. 10/10 was to become World Mental Health Day, coincidentally or not. I don't really believe in coincidences. But on 10/10, yeah, my old friend knocked on my door, and he said he was just passing through town, through Wagga Wagga, and he had what he called a spiritual prompt to come and knock on my door. So, and he comes and we have coffee and he tells me his story. And 2 days later, I had what I can only call a spiritual awakening. And then my life started to change. Not like an overnight miracle or anything, but slowly started to change. And I was able to get my life back. And I've had no depression since. I was able to get off meds, and my new wife, who I met the next year, helped me because I was on mental health orders as well to take meds. It was like a court order. So she went into bat for me and got that removed. Anyhow, I got a lot of stories. But from that time in 1997, my life started to change. It was amazing. So I went from being told that what I had was incurable, which they're still telling people that as well, and that I'd have to be on meds for the rest of my life. Hello, there's alternatives, that's for sure, and that I'd never work again. Well, I worked again, and it didn't take too long. I started filling up bubblegum machines first with my wife. We travelled all over the Riverina, filling up, the machines your kids pester you for $2 to get a bouncing ball out of, or some bubblegum or whatever. And they were good days. And then I decided to start selling pool tables because I was a local snooker champion of Wagga and a pretty handy pool player. And people would often ask me advice about pool tables in the home. So I decided that's what I wanted to do. So I travelled to Melbourne and met all the pool table manufacturers and started hauling tables back to Wagga and installing them. And then in 2003, we opened a pool hall in the main street of Wagga, 16 pool tables and a jukebox. And we did that for 6 years until 2009, when we decided to move to Grafton, to a warmer climate, because of my wife's asthma. I lost a friend to an asthma attack who was the same age as me at the time. And I didn't want to lose my wife. I said, come on, let's move to a different climate, which worked a treat, I'm happy to say. So we moved to Grafton. And I just got to say, those 6 years of operating a pool hall, we had a lot of youth, as you can imagine. And through my 15 dark years, I wasn't always unwell. Certainly there was times when I was hospitalised, I was that unwell. But there was other times when I was well enough. And I did various counselling courses because that kind of fitted with what I was doing. The first one was with the Smith family. And I did a counselling course with them so I could interview people because I was a volunteer with them. People used to come in, mostly women, come in for handouts of cash and food. And mostly it was because the man had blown their money on addictions, whether it's gambling, drugs, whatever. So that was valuable. And then I did another counselling course called front wheel counselling, where you take the steering wheel of your life kind of thing. And then I did a youth counselling course. And then after 1997, I worked with juvenile justice for a time as well, part-time in Riverina. And then when I moved to Grafton, I took a punt on getting a job back with them because they've got a youth centre here as well, juvenile justice. And that worked a treat because in August 2009 we moved to Grafton, and in November I started with juvenile justice. And they wanted me full-time, but I'd already made up my mind to start my business as mindfulness coach. And in 2009 early, I thought, when we decided we were going to move north, then I thought, what would I do? And I searched my soul and realised my purpose, which was helping people. So that's why I surfed the internet to find out what the latest things in mental health were. And what I found was a book called The Happiness Trap, written by Dr. Russ Harris. And The Happiness Trap is a world bestseller, by the way. I recommend it to anyone. And The Happiness Trap is a book about ACT, which is acceptance and commitment therapy. It's just called simply ACT. And ACT is a very simple mindfulness-based therapy. And I love the book. And I went along and got Dr. Russ Harris to train me as an ACT therapist. And I fell in love with mindfulness in 2009. Thought, wow. And I really thought mindfulness will change the world one day. Now I say mindfulness is changing the world, because back then in 2009, when I first got some business cards printed, because I decided to work for juvenile justice, which I did until I retired, part-time, but I wanted to do my mindfulness work part-time as well. And now I'm part-time mindfulness coach, and I call myself Mindfulness Master these days, because I know who I am and I know why I'm here. Yeah. So so that's a little bit about my journey. And from the time of my awakening, I started a morning practice. And I recommend this for anyone. I'm a dawn person. And every morning at dawn, I connect with my source energy. And usually I give thanks, of course, because gratitude is a powerful practice on its own. But I give thanks and I say, what are we doing today, soul? S-O-L. S-O-L. Soul is an ancient Roman word for the sun. That does me for source energy. And when you think about it, the sun really is source energy for the planet as well. So at dawn every day, I'll just get back to 1998 and the epiphany from the light. I want to talk about that one, because at dawn every day, I got my spiritual awakening through religion to start with. And what happened on 10th of October, when my friend knocked on my door and told me his story, a powerful story as well. And that's why I encourage people to tell their stories, because that's the way we're going to end stigma, mental health stigma. And it inspires people. People realise they're not the only ones, and there's always hope. But early in 1998, I was reading the Bible actually at dawn, because I decided I wanted to read that book. It's a big book. It took a while to read it. And I studied it pretty intensively for 4 years. And I now call that my apprenticeship into spirituality. But I was reading it one morning, and the epiphany came. I was reading, and I'll never forget this moment either, because it was another pivotal moment. And the epiphany was, help the mentally ill. And it came to my mind in that same powerful way as the dark one did. And I still remember, and I looked up to the heavens, and I used to say Lord back then, but I changed it. So I said, but Lord, I'm one of them. That just seemed so ridiculous to me. What could I do? Pensioned off, I was, under orders from the mental health system, on the road to nowhere. What could I do? But it was to become my driving force almost in time. And things happen in universe time. I've learned this. That's why we need to be patient. Whatever we put out there, whatever our heart intention is, put it out there in the universe. And then as long as you're living in what I call mindful awareness, the universe starts moving the furniture for us. And honestly, it didn't take too long. Well, it did. It took years probably, but it didn't take too long before I was living a life of synchronicity, a synchronized life, synchronized with whatever that powerful thing, that energy is out there. And I've come to learn that, at our core, we are energy. And when we develop that relationship with source energy, wow, that's all I can say. And it's a very simple practice. And like I said earlier, I'll just share with you how I've simplified over 9,000 hours of study into mindfulness and culture and all different aspects. And I've simplified it down to this: be mindful, pause, connect. If you Google that, you'll find me. Never could I have dreamed back then that I'd have over 1 million people following my Facebook pages, and that I've touched that many lives in some small way or in big ways sometimes, and helped tens of thousands of people with their mental health. So even though I was a nobody, you know, honestly, a nobody with no education or anything else. So if I can do it, anyone can. And what's missing in mental health today is spirituality and culture. And I was just having this conversation very recently with the manager of the Northern New South Wales LHD, which is local health district, and she's the manager of mental health and alcohol and other drugs. And she agreed with me. John, you're right. But how do we do it? Because what I said to her was, and I shared a little story, which I'll share with you if you like. A lady rang me at 8 o'clock one morning, and she was in tears. She was crying. And she said, I don't want to be alive anymore. And I said, where are you? And she was about 40 k's out of town. And I said, can you come into town? Yeah, she could. So she did. So we had a session, and I taught her mindfulness, and I told her, and also I taught her some culture, because even though she wasn't Aboriginal, her partner was, and she had Aboriginal friends as well. But I taught her about Ghana practice. And Ghana, G-A-N'-N-A, Ghana is a Bundjalung word, and that's where I live, in Bundjalung country. Bundjalung word for mindfulness. And Ghana practice has been used for millennia by Aboriginal people. In the Northern Territory, it's called Dadiri, and Dadiri is the same thing, but there's different dialects around Australia. There's other names too. But Ghana is a deep listening practice that's used to overcome trauma. So if there was a trauma in the tribe, then you go to the spiritual guru of that tribe, and he would teach you to practice Ghana. He'd send you into the bush to practice deep listening beyond our thoughts. And we all know what that connection is like. And they were barefoot as well. And barefoot's good because it takes the static out of our bodies. So, and when we do go bush and practice that deep listening, not with our ears, but beyond our thoughts, and then we get answers. Nature speaks if we're quiet enough to listen. You know, an animal might run out of the bush, or birds might land on a branch near us, or whatever. We can get answers and healing. Yeah, so that's just in one culture, but mindfulness is in all cultures. Sometimes it's not called that, but really it's all the same thing. And the way I've simplified, like I started to say, be mindful, pause, connect. If you Google that, you'll find me. I've made it my thing. Be mindful is an instruction that I teach people to use when they have an unhelpful or negative thought, or if they notice their mind taking them into the past, which can make us depressed, or into the future, which can make us anxious. When we notice, or if we just notice our mind far away, not where our body is, then we use the heart instruction. And one huge thing I learned from my Bible study back in those days, or two things really from that book: Jesus' message of love your neighbour as yourself, and God reads hearts, not minds, hearts. God reads hearts. It's powerful on its own, just that. You can dwell on that later. But when we give a heart instruction to our mind, be mindful. we tell ourselves. And then we allow that to trigger a pause. And it only takes a few seconds. We pause. And in that pause, we connect. And we connect in three ways. We connect with where we are, and it doesn't matter where we are, any time of day, no matter what we're doing, we can connect. And we connect using our five senses. We connect with who we're with full presence. Like, you are all beautiful, because while I'm talking, you're fully present with me. And when you're talking, I'll be fully present with you. And that means not thinking about what to say next, or not having any agenda, just being present. It's the greatest gift we can give our loved ones, that's for sure. And the third part of the connection is connecting with our source energy, whatever you believe that to be. And it becomes very powerful. I often say the power of mindfulness is in the silence between our thoughts. And the more silence we create throughout our day, the more power to us. Because it's that silence we create that opens up the doorways of creativity. The next step comes. We start to realize that we don't need a plan. We're part of a plan, some grand plan. And it also opens up the doorway, or the door of intuition. We become intuitive. And it's a powerful, powerful tool, especially in parenting. Yeah. Anyhow, how are we going, Nicole?
We're going wonderfully, John. There's so much there. You just touched on so many incredible points that we can launch off, and I'm sure we will in our discussion with those who are here live later on. But if I can reflect back some of the parts that have really stood out to me, the importance you highlight with the mental health system and the necessity to bring in culture and spirit into that, and the way that you ground that in your own story, your own heritage, the land that you are on, the land that we are on, is such an important piece of the conversation. And, often in the near-death experience community, and even, wider spiritual circles, people can get so caught up in talking about the experience, or in many ways kind of checking out, like the mind going somewhere else, and whether you're in space cadet mode or carried away with things that in some way are unearthly. And what I really appreciate about your story and the way you share, John, is how incredibly grounded your story is. And perhaps because of the challenges that came after the experience, that might have been, I'm guessing that might have been part of the reason why your story and your sharing is just so incredibly here and now, and grounded in the physical world and the community. And what I hear through you is so much that spirit is the ordinary and the everyday, and just infused in our regular interactions. And I love that.
Thanks, Nicole. Yeah. And, following that conversation, well, the manager, like I was saying, of this local health district up here, she said, John, how do we do it? It's a tough one, because it's not about calling in the Catholic priest. It's much more than that. Yeah. But the good news is that the peer workers and people with lived experience like me are starting to get a voice, and the government is actually directed through all the local health districts. I know in New South Wales, I'm not sure about Australia-wide, and they're not only encouraging them, but insisting that they start listening to people with lived experience. Because, that girl that came to see me, and she shared that she didn't want to go anywhere near the mental health system anymore. She'd had it. She wasn't going there. And she's not the only one either, because all they want to do is medicate her. And, it's a Band-Aid at best. and I know medication can be handy. It was helpful for me at some stages when my life was out of control. Yeah, and she'll be fine, I know, because I was able to give her a whole new perspective, especially on spirit, and now she has a practice, something to practice. And when you do start practicing that very simple practice of be mindful, pause, connect, and then after a while you don't have to use the instruction, it just becomes automatic. You just pause and connect. And it's so powerful in so many ways, you know, especially with her, because, well, if someone's in your face, for example, with a mindful practice, one time we might have reacted. Someone's in our face, so we react, and then you know, it's on. But with mindfulness, we pause. We just pause and connect. And just those few seconds, we get, you know, our intuition's turned on, so we get to see, we gain insight into why they're carrying on or saying or doing what they're doing. We get insights into that. And we come to realize that what people say and do is where they're coming from. Even with what I say and do, it's where I'm coming from. And we're all the same. Yeah. So what other people say and do really has nothing to do with us. It's none of our business. Yeah. And that in itself is very, very helpful, especially for people with anger issues and all sorts of things. Yeah. Anyhow, we'll have a bit of Q&A or something.
Yeah, we will. And thank you,
later.
John. Thank you for the path that you walk, for the presence that you are, for the, you know, for just sharing you know, here you are, here's your story, and you walk it, and it's beautiful. And especially being unafraid to have the conversations of some of those really challenging areas and stigmatized areas that people don't want to talk about, or people are very afraid to discuss. And when we talk spirituality, we need to talk mental health. Often, you know, there are so many grey areas there. And so thank you for being an advocate in that space, and shining a bright, beautiful light.
Well, the new perspective, as you know, Nicole, on psychosis even, that's what's diagnosed, but they're spiritual experiences, no question. The experiences I've had, and many others as well. And the new term globally, and it's growing, is spiritual emergency. And if we don't have the right mentor who's able to explain what's going on, you know, perhaps if I had a mentor with lived experience way back in 1982, it could be a whole new story, a different story, you know, could have sent me on a different pathway altogether. Who knows? But anyhow, it's not about 1982. It's about 2020.
It sure is. What a time and what a year. So John, we'll put in the link wherever we post this video, ways that people can reach you, and be mindful and pause and connect together there with you. So thank you for sharing. Thanks for joining us at Sydney IANDS. And we will wrap up this piece and jump into our Q&A. So thanks again, John.
It's a pleasure, Nicole. Bye.
Bye.